Ever since the last time I made the best anime of the year of 2020 video, I have been wondering why not make a top worst anime of 2021 this time around, since the anime awards for this year are just around the corner. Lucky for me, this past year was filled with so many diverse titles. Some we were quite excited for, like Mushoku Tensei, one of the best anime shows of the year and even one of the best in its genre. Attack on Titan, the last season, or its first part to be precise. Shadow's House, we had Tokyo Revengers, 86, Vivai, Odd Taxi, and the list goes on. With great titles, we also had bad anime titles that came to balance this year overall. Like everything in life, there must be balance. Or so it was what Thanos used to say. And believe me, there are quite the amount of anime titles I watched in which I actually had a first good impression. Or even other titles that I also watched for the sake of content. Because, yes, I went through the horrific experience just for this video. As a reminder, this video contains spoilers for every single title I will be talking about today, so if you ever wish to skip spoilers, feel free to check the timestamps and click off the video if you don't want to be spoiled. But trust me, you won't be watching the anime shows I'll be mentioning anyways, because, well, they were horrible in their own unique way. Also, bear in mind that the following shows are only those that I had previously watched, which is kind of obvious since it wouldn't make sense to talk about a particular anime if I had not seen it yet. But anyways, hey guys, this is Keka and here is the top 5 worst anime of 2021. The Promised Neverland made it to the list. Obviously it's second season. I won't dive deep into the reasons as to why the sequel failed miserably, since I've already made an entire video about it. I'll leave it in the description if you wish to check it out. But summarizing everything that was said in that video, the sequel was very unfaithful to the original source. Like many anime adaptations to be honest, but this one took the bar and rose it to a new entire level. Not to mention it was unfaithfully adapted to the worse, because skipping one of the most exciting and interesting arcs, and consequently erasing a lot of characters in the process, which included but not limited to badass demons and also feisty humans thriving to survive the demon hunt in the Pawn arc, wasn't enough for them. Not only did they skip a lot of content, but they also rushed most of the manga, trying to squeeze a lot of chapters into a single episode, making it difficult for non-manga readers to fully understand the events that occurred throughout most of the season, leading to a very bad story pacing in my opinion. Characters such as Norman were written differently and in a poorer way, if I have to say, since he is portrayed mainly as a brilliant and valiant character in the manga, and as you obviously know, he has proven to be nothing of the sort, being a complete coward and being all over the place when it comes to his resolutions, despite being quote-unquote saved by Emma during the events in the Demon Village. Despite having one of the cleanest animations and design from the vast list of anime shows during the winter season of 2021, these elements were predominant over my decision of including this sequel in this list, since it was ultimately ruined by poor decisions that were made internally before adapting this season of this amazing franchise that was also ruined in my opinion. Saihate no Paladin is one of the most recent anime shows that aired during the fall season. If I could trim down this show up to its 5th episode, I'll be honest, it wouldn't be that bad. The main issue I have with this anime is its inability to give enough intrigue to the story. I went ahead completely unaware of how the anime would play out. The first few episodes were interesting enough, since there were a lot of mysteries to be unfolded around William and how he was taken care by his 3 guardians, by the undead. The plot began to take its shape the longer it went by, until episode 5, where an evil god appears and attempts to take William's friend's souls. The worst part is that William is an inept and immature boy that somehow is able to temporarily beat this evil god, and then it sets out on a journey. From this point on, the story becomes just another dull adventure of a main character that progressively becomes more and more powerful and cannot be beaten, winning every battle against anything for the sake of portraying an unbeatable protagonist in the story. Not to mention that William himself is overall a very boring and edgy character, becoming too emotional whenever an issue occurs in his path instead of toughening up, since he endures quite the amount of tragedy throughout his journey. Considering how I had set a decent amount of expectations in the show, it left a bitter taste for being mediocre in all fronts, including the art style and also the animation. Though the animation is even worse than what I'm portraying, though the animation studio in question had been previously involved in certain anime shows like Gleipnir, which I had particularly enjoyed on a technical level, this time around it was nothing special. It was honestly disappointing, hence the reason it made it to this list. What if the ultimately evolved full dive RPG was a crappier game than reality? This anime show aired during the summer season of last year. After reading the premise, my immediate thoughts were, okay, this one is a satire show trying to convey how annoying and repetitive the MMORPG anime shows are in reality, so this looks promising. And I wasn't wrong. I mean, there seemed to be an attempt at making such show, and trying to mock this type of stories is something I really enjoy. However, it failed on so many levels, okay? First of all, I was horrified by the level of presentation, how poorly conceived the characters were, how the plot was played out, and even the animation that for a while I thought it had been purposely made that way, to be simple and wacky. But the more I watched, the more I realized that it wasn't. Starting with the main character that is clearly incompetent and unlikable in all fronts. Not to mention, like, the jokes that he makes are so repetitive that it comes to be a nuisance in the end for hearing them all the time. It is like the author couldn't find better ways to keep the level of sarcasm. And the worst part is, this main character remains useless throughout most of the show until all of a sudden he gets some random power-up boost that emerges in the last fight. The plot twist in the end was somewhat interesting, but the lack of build-up during the entire show made it completely obsolete. Introducing Kamui as a guide for Hiro to progress throughout the story was somewhat cleverly made. However, serving merely as a guide wasn't particularly interesting either, since we're talking about a character that barely makes an appearance and barely has any other role, considering the amount of times he's mentioned in the show. When it comes to other characters, well, they are the pure definition of cliché. Maybe for the exception of Riona, since she's in my opinion the most interesting one out of the whole cast. Mizariza is a complete psycho, OP and perverted female character. Alicia is completely obsessed with his brother's death until the very end and wants to kill Hiro no matter what. And Tesla, well, he pretends to be the calm and OP hero of any cliché anime show until the plot twist of the end. Everything in this show screams average. And if the jokes were more diverse and the RPG elements were to be ridiculed in a more clever way per se, I think this anime could have been a little bit more interesting. But instead it focuses on the protagonist's lack of ability and intelligence, which for me it misses its whole purpose, to be satire, or so it was what I first thought about this anime to be. Of course I could not make this list without including Redo of Healer. And yes, if you go check out my mail, I give it a 7 out of 10. Why? Because despite all the degenerate scenes, the plot in itself isn't that bad, and the main character is actually quite well developed. He went from a petty little victim that would get fucked over, and I mean literally, by everyone, to a complete badass that only wanted revenge, and he would do so without any scruples. Not to mention, he had schemed the perfect plot against everyone that had torture him and his village in the most despicable way. Of course, the sex scenes that were obviously quite present throughout the show served to represent the main theme of it, that being an hentai anime. But the way he built up his revenge was so incredibly malefic that it kept me so attached to what was going to happen next. And to be honest, I'm quite curious to hear about a possible sequel, since I want to see the protagonist's character development, especially once his revenge is over. Because the way the story is going, he will definitely fulfill his vengeance, and once he's found peace in himself, I wonder how his life would be after that. There is nothing worth mentioning in this anime, to be honest. The animation is quite mediocre, the design was also nothing special, the soundtrack was boring. But if you wish to hear more about my opinion in regard to Redo of Healer, feel free to check out the video I made a couple of months ago, link in the description. Last on our list as the worst anime of the year is, you guessed it, X-Arm. Lucky for this anime, on Mal, we can't give anything below 1 out of 10. Otherwise this shit would have gotten a 0 for sure. Again, I made a video about this abomination, it will be in the description. But long story short, there is one fundamental and universal rule for anime, regardless of its plot, the characters or anything else. And that is animation. This atrocity didn't even meet the standards of it. It was the main reason for this anime's groundbreaking and glorious fall. You have masterpieces like Beastars that broke the shell of 3D animation prejudices by delivering the example of CGI and design, blending 2D and 3D shades and forms and creating a beauty. X-Arm's attempt at producing a decent CGI-based anime was a total fail, since the animation was horrendous. It seemed that the team behind it were a bunch of interns learning how to properly use CGI, led by a blind director. I tried to give it a go, but to be blunt, I have no idea what this anime is about. And I don't care. The characters look like robots with a lack of human expressions, let alone emotions. The fighting scenes were abhorrent with unnatural movements, and sometimes you could even notice glitched out movements. I believe the main issue here was the choice of bringing in a director that only had live action filmmaker experience, which led to a snowball of poor decisions. Not to mention, Yoshikatsu Kimura, which was the director, never had worked on anime before or in animation. And apparently, instead of bringing a team of full talented animation people, he decides to bring his own team, which never had experience in animation either. And obviously, this only led to a big catastrophe. Hence the reason it made top 1 as the worst anime of the year. Please, if you ever consider watching it, don't watch it. You will be left in shock. I swear I have never seen this level of bad animation in all my life. Gibiate next to this anime is actually pretty good. So yeah, if you ever watch Gibiate and you agree with the opinion of being bad, well, you will actually find it pretty good, trust me. Well, and that is it for my top 5 worst anime of the year. Thank you so very much for watching. Next upload will probably be in 2 weeks time, depending how tight my schedule is. And as usual guys, don't forget to watch your daily dose of anime because it's good for your brain and heart. Take care, and I'll see all my beloved weeps in the next video.